8 is a good number. So I read from Isaiah 28, 1 to 8. Woe to the crown of pride. Woe means warning. To the drunkards of Ephraim, whose glorious beauty is a fading flower, which are on the head of the fat valleys of them that are overcome with wine. Behold, the Lord has a mighty and strong one, which as a tempest of hail and a destroying storm, as a flood of mighty waters overflowing, shall cast down to the earth with the hand the crown of pride, the drunkenness of Ephraim. They shall be trodden under foot, and the glorious beauty which is on the head of the fat valley shall be a fading flower, and as the hasty fruit before the summer, which, when he looks upon it, sees while it is yet in his hands that it is eaten up. In that day shall the Lord of hosts be a crown of glory, and for a diadem of beauty unto the residue of his people, and for a spirit of judgment to he that sits in judgment, and for strength to them that turn the battle to the gate. But they also have erred through wine, made mistakes, and through strong drink are out of the way. The priest and the prophet have erred through strong drink. They have swallowed up wine. They are out of the way through strong drink. They err in vision. They stumble in judgment. For all tables are full of vomit and filthiness, so that there is no place clean. When you are the chosen people, or you feel you are the chosen people, a lot of times people get drunken with power. This is the wine we speak of. And they oppress people. And they become unapproachable. And they try to manipulate people. And they lie about the truth. When our leaders do this, Ephraim being of the nation of Israel. You know, Gal Gadot is an Israeli. She's an Israelite. She is a descendant of the tribes of Israel. But being chosen doesn't mean that you're good. It's interesting that Gal represents Wonder Woman. She's the chosen one. She has power. But what she does with that power, does she corrupt judgment? Does she do immoral things? Does she oppress people with her power? Does she use the power to suit herself and not others? Think about the parallels in today's world. Donald Trump removing himself from the Paris Accords. Being reckless with his words. Offending his allies. Attacking people doing service, abusing his powers to fire the CIA, head of the CIA and the head of the FBI, attacking judges in the society. Is this the way to go? What happens to those people? According to the scripture, they will be overthrown and they will be destroyed, and their drunkenness will destroy them, and the beauty that their nation represented will fade away. You see, we must not follow these people. And a lot of these people are actually gateways. They are the people you're supposed to look to. The priest, the prophet, the king, the elders. This is what is written in the scripture. People actually looked to these people and they led them astray. They made them go into idolatry, focusing on individuals. How many of us worship individuals? We honor with extreme extent individuals when we should really try to inculcate the values these individuals have. Inculcate means to take on, by the way. That may be a big word. So, today, if you think that what I'm talking about is a mythos, And everything I've been telling you is Christianity. If you think it's a mythos, at least adhere to the moral fabric of that mythos. Do. And take heed to the warnings that it says, because it definitely speaks about human nature. And it also encourages us to better deal with one another. And so this particular video looks at the heart of some people. Sierra Wardrow talks about Wonder Woman and the one thing it's missing. And this gentleman from Rolling Stone, his name is Tim Grierson, will look at his point of view. He's a man, and of course Wardlow is a woman. I want you to listen to the heart of this person. Now, I've already dealt with this issue before twice. I dealt with it first from another woman in the industry who made an article on the shortcomings of Wonder Woman and how it didn't address feminism and sexism properly. And then it came back with another woman who wrote a book on the secret history of Wonder Woman, and she said the very same things. And now here we have a third woman, Sierra Wardrow, and she's going to say the very same things. But I'm not going to go in a combative way. I'm going to deal with these feminists in a way I want you to see what they expected or what they hoped for. And then I'm going to address where I think that actually happened in the movie. But, of course, it was not done in an overt way and for good reason. There are people who look at this movie and, again, maybe it's because they don't understand what is actually going on. They said there's no feminism in this movie. This is just a movie about a woman and her growth and development in the world of men and her journey. And they liked how it was, and a lot of times these people who are speaking, they don't even know what feminism means. Okay. So this woman here, Sierra Wardrow, either she is intentionally ignoring what happened in the movie, or it is that she absolutely didn't see it. But I want you to hear what she says. And I want you to listen to her expectation. Do not judge her. The film moved the superhero's origin story back 2 decades, but missed an important opportunity to fully, note the word she's saying, fully explore the complexities of World War I. Oh, by the way, this video is going to have some spoilers, okay? There's a lot of talk about Wonder Woman right now, and for good reason. It's a milestone moment for Hollywood and an undeniable commercial and critical hit. But for all the recent discussion on how Wonder Woman fits into the history of the character of superhero movies, of female-helmed big-budget projects, how the film handles history has attracted surprisingly little commentary, even though there are interesting comments to be made there and questions to be asked. While the basic premise of Wonder Woman comes from the original version of Diana's original story in the comics, Steve Trevor's plane crash lands by the Amazon's hidden island paradise, and she saves him and ultimately joins him when he returns to the outside world. Okay. Okay, let's just really try and delve into this really quickly. Alan Heinberg, he didn't say this, it was actually Patty Jenkins, but we are in a very World War I world today with nationalism and how it would take very little to start a global conflict. And this is very true. World War I was based on a certain nation and someone being assassinated, and this catapulted into a series of events where more and more countries participated in a battle. It was, some people think, pointless. I think the people of today would consider it something that was relevant, because today we have a number of countries building nuclear weapons and stuff, and unfortunately, the United States has preemptively struck at a number of these countries. Now, preemptive strikes have happened a couple times. Now, in rules of engagement in war, it was once thought, until George Bush totally destroyed that idea, that you shouldn't attack someone without reasonable grounds to attack them. You know, for instance, if they were, for instance, shown to have nuclear weapons and they are using them on another nation. But George Bush went and attacked Saddam Hussein in Iraq, saying they had weapons of mass destruction when that was not true. And two, that they had been involved in the 9/11 disaster, which they weren't. Now that was horrible. And of course, George Bush pays no consequence for those war crimes. And his people vehemently defend him still to this day for something that is just so atrocious that we will not even go into it. You know, it's basically the assassination of Saddam Hussein. Barack Obama, his administration, has a very controversial story, and there's no defense for it. The assassination of Gaddafi in Libya. Under his administration, Gaddafi was assassinated. This is straight up what happened. Now we have Donald Trump. And from all appearances, it seems as though there was again a preemptive strike on Syria. So we've been having these preemptive strikes now. It was a little bit more covert with Barack Obama in that they did not acknowledge that they assassinated Gaddafi, but they had their troops there, the special forces. But my point being this. Of course, he also assassinated Osama bin Laden, right? But he was supposed to be one of the people who was implicated in the 9/11 bombings, and he took credit for it. So that's okay. That's retribution, right? My point is that this is what Allen Heinberg saying, that nationalism is on the rise. You hear nationalist this and nationalist that. You got the nationalist party here and the nationalist party there. And if you look at this particular regime in the United States of America, they're not trying to be global anymore. They're not trying to have globalization. They're trying to be nationalistic. You know, the world goes through waves. People reject certain things when it doesn't seem as though it's working for them. All right, so Patty Jenkins expressed a similar view in the same story. World War I was the first time that civilization as we knew it was finding its roots. And the civilization we know is automated civilization. But it's not something that we really know the history of. Even the way that it was unclear who was right in World War I is really interesting parallel to this time. Then you take a God with a moral compass and moral belief system and you drop them into this world. There are questions about women's rights, about a mechanization war where you don't see who you're killing. It was such a cool time. All of these are valid points, and yet for their talk of being attracted to the complexities of World War I, on the whole, the film fails to embrace these complexities in a significant way. This is her opinion, of course. Wonder Woman is solidly entertaining in a realm above the drawn-out destruction porn of the first 3 DC Extended Universe films. Okay. But in this specific regard, it is also a missed opportunity. There are many reasons why it makes a lot of sense to give Wonder Woman a World War I origin story. As the first global-scale war with automated weaponry, it is undoubtedly felt like not just the war to end all wars, but pretty much the end of the world for those involved, and the timing also allows for a nod to the women's suffrage movement. That said, one of the reasons why World War I makes only the occasional cinematic appearance in comparison to World War II's more or less constant presence is its aforementioned complexities. Of course, all wars are complex, but World War I is the sort that defies simplification into a good versus evil narrative. Generally speaking, the Great War shows up in movies where the punchline is, in war everybody loses, period, which is great for the 1930s, all quiet on the Western Front, but doesn't lend itself well to a relatively light-hearted summer superhero entertainment. However, instead of attacking the challenge head-on, Wonder Woman handles it by telling the audience one thing and showing them another. This is the person picking and choosing spots in the movie now to address her point. Though Steve Trevor, Chris Pine, spends the better part of the film attempting to convince Diana that the war is much more complicated than she thinks, the film itself never really challenges Steve's statement to Diana on the shore of Themyscira. I'm one of the good guys, and those are the bad guys, the Germans. Yes, Steve said that because he wanted to preserve his tail. You looking at all these Amazons and they're ready to kill you, of course you're going to say that, right? But if you really were watching the film, I'm just going to reply to her here. If you really were watching the film, you would realize that Steve Trevor, and this is a number of times he said this is war. This is an anti-war film, by the way. This is war. These men have been in the trenches for a very long time, and the men hadn't eaten, and there was some people hiding in the trenches with the men. And Steve says, I've done bad things. And then another time, Steve said, when he was talking about the smuggler and the murderer, because Diana said, oh, so I'm together with a murderer, a smuggler, and a con man. And Steve Trevor says, I'm all those things. So why are you with me? See, one of the things people have to realize is Steve Trevor has not done good things in his life. And the movie makes it very clear that Steve Trevor was not, what we call an innocent person. This was war. Okay? Also, though Diana is going along with Steve Trevor, at the end of the film, you hear Diana saying, you do not deserve me, when she realizes what mankind is like and how Steve Trevor himself is not a good person in terms of what he's done. Okay? She sees that Steve Trevor, when the people die, when General Ludendorff bombs out and chemical gases out with this special mustard gas that you can't even protect yourself with gas masks with. When he tests it out on this village that Diana just saved, she realizes that because Steve prevented Diana from killing General Ludendorff, which she thought would be the solution to the problem. And because Steve kept her from doing that, Ludendorff did this ghastly act and killed all these people. And she's realizing Steve is not much different to Ludendorff. So the movie literally shows you this in their semi-final discussion, the last discussion. She never really got to say, I'm sorry, Steve, for saying this and all. No, it never happened. But she wanted nothing to do with Steve, and Steve had to go on his way, right? Because she realized mankind, they're not good. This is why Ares was able to make this convincing argument to Wonder Woman that mankind, they're not deserved. They don't deserve to be saved. You should kill them all. Because Ares came to the same conclusion. So the point about that she's making that Steve, they pick sides. There was a good guy and bad guy. There's so many things in this movie that show that the Germans weren't bad guys, because the Germans were seeking amnesty. They were seeking to surrender, the generals. It was General Ludendorff who was a bad person, but then again we see other dimensions of him that make him kind of likable. But General Ludendorff, because he does care for people, he actually cared for Dr. Poison, right? He was very interested in that, and she had the same idea. And even though she was failing at making this special gas, I'm gonna go back to this in a minute with this article. There was a special gas she made that the gas masks of the Allies, it would break the gas mask, and that's what would give them the win. So it wasn't that there wasn't chemical warfare being used in World War I. Everybody knows both sides were using chemical warfare. It was that this particular gas could break through the gas masks, and therefore it can kill everybody. They had found an edge. Okay? So this film actually shows that no side was actually good. And here's another example of that. We saw that also. Diana was actually speeching off the generals who did not care for the soldiers. They only cared about the amnesty. Okay? They cared that the amnesty was kept between the two sides, the Allies and the other Allies. Okay? Nobody ever said anybody was right or wrong in this movie. This movie never pointed out who was good and who was bad. Ludendorff was bad, yes. But the Germans weren't bad. And we know this for a fact. Okay? So when people talk about, nobody thinks of the Germans as bad in this movie. They're actually cool people. They were trying to get the amnesty. They were losing the war, so they were trying to get amnesty. Ludendorff, and if you go and read historically, Ludendorff criticized his people, the Germans and the Austrians, for surrendering so easily. Okay? So this is in keeping with history, and it's in keeping with General Ludendorff's point of view. So when he killed the generals, which you guys seem to completely forget about, you got to understand, the generals, they were going to surrender. Okay? And the Germans, they were cool people. They were like, man, I ain't eaten a long time, and Ludendorff killed the dude. Okay? It was Ludendorff who was bad. Dr. Poison even, she was bad. Obviously she was bad. But again, look, she didn't get killed at the end of the movie. He's telling you that Wonder Woman realizes that you had to do what you had to do. I said in another video that when I look at Ludendorff and I look at Dr. Marut, I can see them as heroes if I look at it from their perspective, because they were doing whatever they could to make sure that they won the war. And the war ended on their terms. Just as how the United States attacked Japan and bombed the daylights out of Hiroshima. We talked about this before. So I always could understand where Ludendorff was coming back from. He decided he was not giving up. And he had sacrificed everything. And he was willing to annihilate, find a way, a solution to annihilate everybody on the battlefield that was his opposition, so they would cause a surrender. And once they surrendered, he'd be cool. We win. And remember, the Kaiser was a king in Germany. It was a king. It was the King's War. Kaiser's men going in and fighting. And this was because an Austrian dude, or Austrian royalty, a duke, was killed. And Kaiser was close to that duke. And this is how this whole thing started. Okay? So, I'm just saying that this movie actually covers that. And then the generals, how they were behaving. So she goes on anyway. She's saying that, you know, you make it sound like Steve is the good guy and the Germans are bad guys. This movie didn't say that at all. This movie never said that. Because if you do remember, the Amazons put Steve Trevor in a lasso troop and made him confess. And when he said he was a spy, he was a spy. You know, they didn't release him yet. But they realized that Steve was really trying to save lives. Steve's whole mission in this whole movie was to save people's lives. It was to prevent the science that Dr. Ludendorff and the scientist Dr. Marut, General Ludendorff and Dr. Marut. I don't know why I mix them up, but you know, my mind does that. From creating this weapon that would just wipe out everybody, right? And it was for the Allied forces. And of course he's working for the Allied forces. Now he wasn't supposed to steal the book. He stole the book. Didn't he do that? His orders was just to observe as an American. He didn't just observe, he stole the book. He got himself involved. He was saying the difference between doing nothing and doing something. So Steve, in spite of all his shortcomings, in spite of the heinous things he has done in his life, he decided to do something instead of just standing by the side and seeing things. And that's what he did. And he inspired Diana to do something. Now, let's move on. So Steve's saying, in spite of the fact that I don't deserve you, he said, I got to do something. I got to save these people. So Steve, even though, as again, he was war-torn, he was kind of like, why am I doing this? He still had a sense of duty to try to save lives. That was the whole point behind Steve in this movie. It wasn't about whether his side was right or his side was wrong. Okay, let's move on. Both World War I and World War II had allied powers with different additions and losses of countries involved, facing off against the Germans. But in World War I, the Germans were not Nazis. We know this. Which Wonder Woman seems to forget at times. No, she doesn't. In fact, Wonder Woman doesn't see them as Nazis. Wonder Woman, if you remember her discussion with, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Steve or someone. She was like, why are you guys fighting anyway? Because the funny thing about it was when she asked Chief, all right, Chief, remember Chief? She asked Chief, so why are you here? He said, my family was killed off. And it was funny, but it actually made sense. She said, who killed your family? She said, and he pointed to Steve and he said, his people. Just to show you the stupidness of war. So the chief was a smuggler who smuggled for boat lines. He smuggled for the Allies and he smuggled things in for played both sides of the war. He smuggled it in for the Germans and the Austrians, okay? You got to understand the Ottoman Empire, because the Ottoman Empire was also involved in the war. Chief didn't pick sides, all right? You heard the sniper guy. The sniper guy was for hire. He was a sniper. He was a paid sniper. He sniped for not just the Allies. He sniped for the Germans. He sniped for whoever. That's why he would call a murderer. He was a sniper. So once you pay him, he can do the sniping for you. You understand what I'm saying? The other guy, he was like a guy that pretended to be different people and stuff. He would take on the persona of whoever. All right? The sniper, he liked to sing. He liked to play. The guy who pretended to be different people, he liked to act. And Chief gonna get you whatever you want. So if you've really been paying attention to this movie, which clearly you weren't, your mind was too much into your angle of things. If you were paying attention to this movie, you would realize this movie was not about picking sides in a war. And it sure as hell wasn't about winning a war by knocking out an enemy. Notice that Wonder Woman's enemy in this movie was not the Germans. It was Ares. It was a spirit. It was a spirit that is over men. But a lot of times we make excuses. Oh, the devil made me do this and the devil made me do that. When in fact this movie is saying, no, you choose. It's based on choice. This choice motif has been going since Man of Steel. Again, I'm not trying to be somebody who makes excuses for movies. I just see things. I see the invisible. I see the elephant in the room easy. And I say, okay, come on, elephant, let's go have some dinner. And I have food with the elephant in the room because I see things. Okay? This movie's speaking a lot more, but emotionally, it's telling you a lot of stuff. It's informing you of a lot of stuff. But this is called subliminal teaching. Teaching you on a subliminal level. So the guys were saying, oh, I don't know about feminism. Oh, they ain't got no feminism in this movie. They seeing feminism in action. They're seeing equality in action. And when you show people things, later on it doesn't seem strange to them when they see it a second time and a third time. Because you introduced it to them. See, that's what these films can do. They can do things subtly to the masses and they're not aware that they're getting acclimatized to something. This is how feminism looks. Instead of telling you about feminism and preaching to you about feminism and trying to get you on the feminism train, I show you what feminism looks like. And they'll be like, oh, that don't look like feminism. It don't look like male bashing. Feminism never was about male bashing. So I had to show you it. Some things are better seen and felt than told. That's the power of this film. Let's go on. So, she talks about all the fuss it makes over the chemical weapons Dr. Poison, Elena Añana, develops under General Ludendorff, Danny Houston. It ignores the elephant in the room. Both sides were equally guilty of utilizing chemical weapons with an awareness that weapons would result in civilian as well as enemy casualties. Not to mention the use of poison weapons was already considered a war crime following the Hague Conventions in 1899 and 1907. Yeah, you ain't saying nothing new. Like, we know that. They were using chemical weapons. That's why they had gas masks. That's not the point. The point is, this was a special chemical weapon that could get past the gas mask. It was an edge. It was brilliant. Dr. Maru did a brilliant thing. And that's why I said, again, because you are thinking they're picking sides, because you have your preconceived notions, you wasn't watching the movies to see what it was giving. You had your opinions. Oh, this anti-German sentiment that was going on the internet. That's what happened. The Germans and the Austrians were on one side, and the Allied forces were on the other side. That's what happened. It was a historical thing. It just so happens Diana is on the side with the Allied forces because she wanted to go to the war. Why did Diana want to go to the war? Do you remember? To stop Ares. The whole premise in the beginning of the film said that Ares caused a rift between mankind. Mankind became jealous with one another and fought one another. So clearly, this movie is not about who's right in that war, because from the beginning, it's saying war was caused because Ares turned mankind against himself. This is the lore. So nobody cares who's right and who's wrong. Steve's purpose in this war is to stop that particular chemical weapon from getting on the battlefield and killing a lot of innocents and people. Steve says, I've seen a lot of innocents and people killed in this war. Steve says he doesn't know why he's still involved in this war. He says, I don't want to do these things. I have to do them. So you have to understand that Steve is on a mission to save lives. Steve, we're not talking about the Allied forces. This movie wasn't about them. It was about Steve and Diana and all the other people around them and the situation. Steve had a particular purpose in this movie. He was on a particular mission. He did not fulfill what the mission said. The mission said, go observe what's happening there and then come back and report. Steve decided instead to take it into his own hands, steal some stuff, and take off. And he was hoping to go back to his superiors and deliver the stuff. What did Steve do? He delivered the stuff to his superiors. Of course he did. But he knows the frustrating thing. Diana said, why did you give them that stuff? Why did you give them? And he said, well, it's all explained in the movie. He says, well, they're my superiors. I can't just keep the stuff. Diana herself says, why did you give them? So Diana is actually thinking like how you think. Why would you give these people this stuff and they don't even agree that this thing will stop the war? When they finally unpack what Steve has given them, all right, because Diana, as simplistic as Diana seemed to have been in this movie, those simple questions are deep ones, okay? And Diana, the character of Diana, Patty Jenkins is a brilliant genius. She took the character of Diana to discuss a lot of different things. And by Diana asking these simple questions, Diana actually, well, what do you think a child would ask, is asking some deep, deep questions. But let's just move on. Steve's idea that handling over formulas in Dr. Poison's notebooks to his superior, there you go, as opposed to, destroying them, would somehow help the Germans and not inspire the Allies, help stop the Germans and not inspire the Allies to develop these weapons themselves, at the very least, an incredibly naive aptitude for supposedly worldly, experience-hardened military man. Not really. Remember, Steve is a military person. So yes, he's going to inform his superiors of these things in a war, of course. But what was stupid, I think, on his part, was giving them the military book with instructions. All right, but you got to understand the problem with this was he was showing that Dr. Poison was developing this sort of weaponization to offset gas masks, and if the Allies don't even have something like gas masks to offset that military equipment, it takes a while to devise these weapons, by the way, then this is just a note to them so that they could try and stop Dr. Poison from making these things. Because the guys in the trench call her Dr. Poison, right? And they know Dr. Poison because Dr. Poison keep on making chemical weapons to mess them up. So the boys in the trenches know about her. Alright? Now, the point is anyway, that at the end of the day, whether you like Dr. Poison or you don't like Dr. Poison, the information was important. Of course, Steve Trevor should not have given that book to the Allies. Because by giving it to the Allies, he basically gave Ares a heads up. The same Ares who was informing Dr. Poison what to use as a weapon against the so-called Allies at the time. Okay? And I'm sure he's on the Allies' side to whisper to the Allies, oh yeah, you need to have the amnesty. Anything to keep war going. So Ares played both sides. But if you were paying attention again, you would see that war is nasty. And it is actually demonic. And Ares plays the role of the devil. If you look at the story, Greek mythology, in this case, mirrors biblical mythology. Alright, if you want to call it biblical mythology. I don't care what you call it. I don't care. I don't think it's biblical mythology, but the point is it's the same story being told over and over again. So if you have the same story being told over and over again, and it seems to apply to us, that we can apply certain principles from the story and they work in everyday life, then there's something about that story that's true. If many different civilizations from many different parts of the world at many different times keep on telling the same story, then that story has to be true. Okay? However format it is, it's got to be true. So, as I said before, now if you guys find that I'm making sense, thank you. Because I watch movies. I only watched this movie once. Once. But I picked up all these things in the movie. Why? Because not everything in a movie is spelt out in caps. Okay? Not everything in a movie is spelt out in capital letters and has to be obvious like a Marvel film. It doesn't have to be obvious. You just have to see it. That's how I knew Zack Snyder wrote this story. Because there's some things you see. Some things are visual. You pick up things. Body language. Psychological. Sometimes they don't want you to be aware of certain things. Things operate best when they're operating in the background. Okay? So let's move on. While it makes perfect sense that Steve wouldn't detail the Allies' use of chemical weaponry to Diana, it's hard to imagine either they did it first or it's all fair in love and war going over all that well with her. It's a bombshell that the film sits on but never deploys, even when it might have been in its own best interest. Actually, the bombshell was applied in the final act when Diana confronts Steve for allowing General Ludendorff to fire that chemical weapon on the people they saved. He allowed General Ludendorff to live to fire that weapon off. It was a bombshell. That was the bombshell part of the film. She realized Steve was just as bad as Ludendorff. The same thing the Allied forces were saying. Let all those people die so we can keep the amnesty. Steve allowed all these people to die to preserve General Ludendorff so that the amnesty could happen. Okay? At the same time trying to get the chemical weapons that Ludendorff had, the formula and the weapons to destroy them. Okay? That was Steve's mission. And he was so on his mission that the very people that they had saved, the village, it was destroyed in the process. But see, that's life. Life's like that. We have to make choices. But it's better if we act than we don't act and regret it later on. That's the point of the movie. That's the point of Man of Steel. Just imagine if Superman did nothing. He just hid from General Zod, and General Zod just started killing people. People forget these things. You see, I think as a person. I'm someone who's a thinker. I think about things. I don't just feel things and just say what I feel. Man of Steel was a great movie. There was no other way for Superman to stop General Zod. And don't tell me about flying out into outer space. General Zod is looking to terraform the world. He's terraforming the world. You have to stop that. And, by the way, the battle with General Zod did go to outer space. And what happened? Zod knocked Superman back down to Earth. Superman did try to take Zod into outer space. He also, in Batman v Superman, tried to take Doomsday into outer space. What happened? They nuclear blast Superman, and Doomsday came falling back into Earth and Earth's gravitational field. Superman was trying to escape Earth's gravitational field to knock Doomsday away from Earth. You guys keep on forgetting these things. Warner Brothers kind of cowed, and it was like, oh, it's a vacant field, not much lives dying. But they should have continued. Because sometimes there's a fallout where lives die. People die. It's part of life. At least Wonder Woman did that. Okay? We saw Wonder Woman go through a lot of German soldiers and Austrian soldiers and Ottoman Empire soldiers. Yeah, she did. She did because she was trying to get to Ares. Because everybody's got a goal and objective in war. Everybody feels they can end war and bring peace. Truth be told, we learn very quickly, war is not good. It does not benefit anyone. I was talking to my cousin, and he said, war is profitable. It makes money for a country. No, it doesn't. It makes money for the defense or the military complex. It makes money for them, so they can make more war. It doesn't benefit anyone. And this movie was an anti-war film. Overall, Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman is a delightful burst of energy. No, it isn't. Not to you. endearing, earnest, undeniably kick-ass, and equally likely to get hearts looking at a sword or turn to mush over a cute baby. However, the one point at which her righteous rhetoric toes the line of irritating, preachy, and pedantic is when she turns on Steve after he stops her from publicly assassinating General Ludendorff at a party full of his colleagues, an act which would likely ruin their chances of being able to sneak into and destroy the stores of Dr. Poison's latest chemical weapon. You get it now. When Ludendorff shortly after makes an example of Veld, the tiny village Diana and others had just helped liberate, tiny, from German control, she blames Steve and accuses him of also being under Ares' corrupting influence, even though she will shortly learn that killing Ludendorff will not stop the spinning of any of the wheels he helped to set in motion, not to mention the war as a whole. I don't think that's irritating. I think it's just that, okay, you have 20/20 hindsight because you saw the movie. In real time, if you know killing this dude will stop the war, okay? If you know killing this dude will stop a war, you're going to assassinate a person. You're going to assassinate him because they have plans to assassinate everyone else. This is what they talked about when they assassinated some leaders. Certain leaders have been assassinated in countries, right? You assassinate the person. This is war. And the war ends. You have the opportunity to do so. You won't assassinate the person? Of course you will. You can think, oh, it's a human being like myself. But no, she's thinking this is Ares, right? 2020 now, we realize, okay, it wasn't Ares. And things just go on as normal. And that's where they fell out. And she's like, humans, they're not under the influence of Ares. They're corrupt. You're corrupt. That's why you allowed those people to die in that village. Of course, Steve didn't want to allow the people to die in the village. He was trying to get to the chemical weapons. But the point is that by that action, just like with the people who were striving for the amnesty and they thought, no, the soldiers may die in the war, but we need to get the amnesty so this war can stop. Similarly, there's no win-win situation in war. Even the best of thoughts, Diana thinking killing Ludendorff would solve the problem. When she did stop Ares eventually, she didn't stop him not out of duty but also out of anger. She stopped him by deflecting his own weapon against himself. The thunderbolt, right? The lightning bolt. But you have to understand something. When she stopped Ares, according to the myth, men started turning to each other and they didn't attack each other. But obviously that didn't stay so for very long because we had World War II. So something happened, and that's why Diana said in BVS, I moved away from mankind 100 years ago. Man made a world where working together is almost impossible. She said that. And I think she knows that because even after World War I and after removing Ares, men still started to fight with each other again. And remember, the Amazons were there to kind of help mankind. They weren't there to charm men and have sex with them. No. They were there to kind of go against Ares and have man live in harmony. But that didn't work, right? Didn't work. All right, so if the film requires a falling out between Diana and Steve, something to give the relationship some tension and to add a redemptive factor to his ultimate self-sacrifice, there's a perfect, historically relevant way of going about it. Diana, realizing that this war, the good guys and bad guys, are determined by the exact location of the trench you're fighting in, and that's about it, that, to some degree, this man she has grown to care for and the side he fights for have committed the same sorts of crimes as the people they are fighting against. It's a realization that generally suits a World War I setting more than a World War II setting. And does this lady realize that's exactly what she realized? She realized that Steve, she said it. She said, you're no different than Ludendorff. She said, Ares really has influenced you. All of you are corrupted. Right? She said that. And when she said, you do not deserve me, and Steve said, I don't deserve you. This world does not deserve you. But I still got to do what I got to do. See, in spite of the shortcomings, we still must try. We must try to do good things. Is there any human being on this earth that's a good guy? Oh, we're good guys. There's no good guys in this world. And there are no bad guys in this world. That's what this movie is saying. We have people who do good things sometimes, and they do atrocious things sometimes. And we struggle to try to do good. We struggle to try to do something good. You think Ludendorff and Dr. Moreau weren't struggling to do something good? They were fighting hard to do something good for their country. They were patriotic. They were nationalists. They believed so much. He was loyal to the Kaiser. He wanted the Kaiser to see what they were doing so that they could win this war, so it could be over. They think they're good guys. There's no such thing as good guys and bad guys in this world. They're just people. Even the worst person. Remember, Patty Jenkins, if you do remember, Patty Jenkins did a movie on a serial killer, for crying out loud. But she got you to see she had attachments to people. She cared about people. Did Ludendorff care for Dr. Poison? Hell yeah. Did Dr. Poison care about General Ludendorff and loyal to him? Hell yeah. And they had a cause. They were trying to win the war. Isn't that what every comic book movie is about? The good guys, Captain America, it's about winning the war, right? Being a patriotic American. Well, this movie took it and flipped it on its head and said, are you sure you're a good guy, America? Are you sure? Is it all about winning a war against the bad guys? That's what this movie's about. This movie's not about good guys and bad guys. That's why you don't hear Diana say, Ares, you're a bad guy. No, she says goodbye, my brother. When he tries to kill her, because it's kill or be killed at that point. It's not about good guys and bad guys. Ares was speaking the truth. She put the lasso of truth around him. So, the fact that they're still going with this rhetoric, even though Patty Jenkins has said a million times, being a hero is not about conquering someone who is considered a villain. She said that over and over. This is an anti-war film. And I'm not defending this film at all. I mean, absolutely not. I know what I saw. But the point is, the fact that this person would say all these erroneous things, there's a reason she's saying that. Let's go all the way to the end. I'm going to read her entire article, and then I'm going to go with, I'm going to give her all the shine in the world I can give her. In switching from World War II to World War I, however, there are rarely two potential motivations. Either a desire to set the film in World War I or to not have the film set in World War II. And at least at some points in Wonder Woman, the latter movie seems more prominent. The latter motive seems more prominent. So she's feeling all of this just to say, oh, they just didn't want to do World War II because Captain America did World War II. The same old prevalent sentiment you hear on the internet. So this person is trying to say, well, it was because it wasn't Captain America, you know. Well, guess what? This movie's talking about something totally different that it focuses on than Captain America was focusing on. Okay? Captain America was focusing on weapons and stopping weapons from destroyed and defeating the Nazis. Okay? And that's how these to be honest with you, that was the propaganda at the time. They were propaganda to stop the Nazis. Even Wonder Woman was about that for a minute. We're not mad. In dealing with World War II, a superhero origin story film would have been extremely wary of stepping too close to the path already tread by Marvel's Chris Evans star Captain America the First Avenger. Even with the World War I setting, Wonder Woman shares more than a few similarities with Captain America's first movie outing. Looking at it this way, on one hand, you've got bright aqua blue strength enhancing mystery formula, either delivered intravenously or in aerosol form, and on the other you got a blonde-haired, blue-eyed American military man named Steve, played by another guy named Chris, sacrificing himself by flying off with a hijacked shipment of the German enemy's superweapons intended for deployment in a civilian population center, just to name a few of the commonalities. So maybe Steve Trevor goes up in flames instead of down in ice. The point is, it's interesting, flames instead of ice. The point is that if Wonder Woman had stuck with the canonical World War II timeline, it would almost assuredly have crossed the line into the territory of one parallel too many with the first Avenger. Of course, the motivation for pushing back Wonder Woman's origin storyline was probably a mix of wanting to maintain a safe distance from Captain America and thinking that World War One better suited some of their narrative goals. There you go. I think you actually now are starting to make sense now. Now you're saying something that makes sense to me. Yes, I think that what happened was Zack Snyder actually couched it in World War One. He wrote the story for World War One, and Zack decided, because Zack's I don't want to say it, but he's an undercover feminist. He's on your side, believe it or not. Sucker Punch, go watch it. It might have flopped at the box office like all little female-led superhero movies, and nobody talks about Sucker Punch being a superhero movie, but it is. But Zack Snyder he was pushing feminism hard on that movie. That was serious feminism, and also abuse, and pushing back at abuse and stuff like that. So Zack Snyder, just go watch Sucker Punch. Go watch Sucker Punch, okay? You need to watch it. But while Wonder Woman does do things here and there to justify the switch from the canonical comic book origin story timeline, one can still imagine that the film missed out on opportunities to do a whole lot more. Like what? Like what you just mentioned? Okay. No. It didn't. It just did it, but not in a overt way. It did it in a subvert way, which is the way you do things. You show things instead of preach. Because you just said she was preachy, and you said she was irritable when she told Steve Trevor a certain thing. Even though she was going to kill one man, of course. Instead, a lot of people she knew died, okay? And she understood now how war is, because she actually experienced it firsthand. At the time, she was just like an onlooker, observing and helping people. But now she felt the loss in war. She had seen it on Themyscira, and she's experiencing it now after she had helped people in the actual war itself. Okay, so much going on in this story, unspoken. And I think people are not smart enough to pick up the unspoken stuff, even though it goes into their system, and they don't realize it goes into their system. They're not aware of the unspoken things that you've actually been programmed and informed of by Patty Jenkins. And you actually feel for it. You say it's a highly entertaining movie. It's emotive. It will have you feeling a certain way about a certain thing. It's designed to do that. Patty Jenkins is a genius, okay? And the reason you like Patty Jenkins' film is because it actually moved your emotions. Patty got you to feel what she feels about war. She got you to do that. Yeah, she got you. It's a big gotcha, Sierra Wardlow. And I decided to highlight you because this is what I'm going to say. You feel disappointed that not enough feminine issues were highlighted in this movie. Then you say you're trying to pick apart the movie, which you didn't succeed in doing, in my opinion. But you're saying that certain things should have been more overt in this movie. And then you come back like you probably like Marvel, because the point of this at the end of the day is you start comparing this film to Captain America, the First Avenger, and apparently you seem to have a problem with the fact that this movie didn't do it in Captain America the First Avenger's time, and that it's such a better, some people think it's a better movie than Captain America the First Avenger, which it should be, because it's coming after Captain America the First Avenger, so they get to improve things. Do you think that Captain Marvel is not going to be a better film than Wonder Woman? Well, they'll try at least. Of course, they'll try. They should explore something. Try to find a topic or theme issue that makes that movie, unique. Because every time a woman's superhero comes out now, instead of having the usual trope of just this badass woman, no, there's more dimension to that. Okay? We saw Antiope. I say again, Robin Wright's character is the best character in this movie, in my opinion. Robin Wright didn't just show that Antiope was this badass who could, use a bow and arrow and kick ass. No. It showed, for the first time in my life I've ever seen this, a general that actually cared about each of the soldiers. When I say care, she discusses with them, she talks with them, and her job is to train them. So not everybody's being trained at the same time. It seems as though they have some kind of cycle where you come in and you train and then you go back to normal life. Maybe there's a certain time of day that you train. But what you notice is Antiope knows these women. They're like her comrades. They've been in battle multiple times. So her job is not to teach them fundamentals. Her job is to consult with them, to help them sharpen their skills. She's called the greatest warrior ever, not because she can fight better than all of those Amazons, but that she helps to maintain them, keep them sharp for whenever an attack happens. Gal Gadot should know this better than anybody because she's an Israeli who has served in the Israeli National Guard. And she's there because they have to be on call all the time because it's a small little nation. On every side, they can be attacked. So everybody needs to know some sort of military training. And Gal's probably got the basic military training, right? She moves like a military person, I'm telling you right now. She's very nice and she got this nice laid back persona, but I know she's military. You can see it in her face. But at the same time, what I'm saying is that I get where you're coming from. You're looking for more overt things, more obvious things, some things to be stressed a lot, and some things don't need to be stressed that much. In my opinion, this movie has done more for anti-war themes, and it's done more for right now. I looked at the Manchester bombing, and I saw Black Eyed Peas out there with the Adrian Grande, I think is her name, and they were singing "Where's the Love," and I saw, I mean, incredible amounts of people singing that song. And I'm not talking about just little girls. It was women, it was children, it was old men, it was young men. Everybody was out there singing that song. And I broke down. I started to cry when I saw the response to such violent, callous, hateful act was to make people come together stronger, to love. And not just to love the victims that died, but to love even the person who had done such an evil thing. And it made me realize that the power of this movie is that Wonder Woman, she loved a woman who had caused the death of her love. Dr. Poison. She let her live. She was going to kill her. She was mad. Ares was like, yes, now you see, none of them are good. They need to be annihilated, right? And instead of annihilating, she remembered what Steve said. And he had done some bad things himself. One guy was so, he couldn't live with himself. He had nightmares when he was sleeping. The sniper, Charlie. War is not a good thing. It was done in a beautiful style where little kids could watch this and enjoy it. Patty Jenkins wants children to see this. She wants everyone to see that war is not the answer. We've seen Themyscira. Yes, they had to prepare for war. But you've seen also that they do farming. They cook, they clean, they teach, they lead in senates. They had a civilization of peace and harmony because everybody knew everybody there. And so what I'm saying is Diana knew about that kind of society. She knew about that kind of world. She came from that world. So Diana wasn't a broken person. Superman had seen his father die. Diana saw her aunt die. Superman had to kill his countryman, his world man, a Kryptonian like himself. Diana had to kill her brother, Ares. There are parallels to this story with Man of Steel. The difference was Man of Steel didn't know who he was. Yes, Diana didn't know fully who she was either, but she grew up like Man of Steel in a nurturing environment. But Kal-El, he had to learn about the world. He grew up in the world. Diana didn't grow up in the world. Batman is like Steve Trevor. Worn out, tired, seen a lot of people near him die, fight a battle that he never was winning. The parallels are there for you to see. Captain America don't have that. Captain America got a dude who is power driven, and Hitler is not the, he's gonna take over the world. That's not General Ludendorff. Can't you see? General Ludendorff was all about winning the war. He wanted the Kaiser to be proud that they would win the war. And he was trying as hard as he could to get it done. He lost his son. He was determined to win this war. He understood the stakes involved. And he was about to give his life if he had to win this war. He was goal-oriented. This wasn't Red Skull, who was power-hungry. This wasn't one-dimensional. This was a man who you can identify with. It's a man who's driven. He reminds me more, and I can empathize with him because I've seen this character before, in General Zod. General Zod is also ruthless. He's also driven. General Zod simply wanted a world for his people. Like a nationalist, he cares only for his people. His people first, and then everyone else second. Ludendorff, for Germany and the Kaiser. That's his allegiance. You got to see the motifs. You've got to see and identify and respect the other side. But if you come from, when you come from a movie and all you can see is what you want to see, oh, people say they were like Nazis. They're like, you take all these external voices from outside. You're not giving the movie a chance to tell its story. You're listening to the voices outside. If you're paying attention to the movie, you'd also notice that the Allied forces had French people with them, Americans, Germans, Japanese. If you're paying attention to the movie. Not something you just got to pay attention to, because any Zack Snyder film, he sneaks in all kinds of things in that movie. Zack's a very busy guy. He'll slip all kinds of things under your nose. You're not paying attention. Because Zack always puts stuff inside of there. The shout outs to the New 52. That's Zack Snyder. The writing. Snyder. You know how much Easter eggs are in this movie? There's tons of Easter eggs in this movie. Of course, it's Zack Snyder. And he's slipping in all kinds of subliminal messages too. Because that's Zack Snyder. He loves doing that. And Patty loves it too. So, I'm just saying, I gotta go watch this movie a couple of times more, because there's a lot going on in this movie that meets the eye. And I'm not trying to disrespect Marvel films, but the fact that you got to bring up a Marvel film tells me you got a bias, Sierra Woodrow. You got a bias. You trying to put a negative spin on this movie, which is all good. And the fact that you have to go into feminism to try and say that there are holes in this movie and it's missing things, it ain't missing nothing, and you know that. It's not as overt. And you don't do things too overtly in these kinds of movies, because you got to keep the movie about Wonder Woman. It's about Wonder Woman. It ain't about feminism. It ain't about World War I. It's about Wonder Woman. That's the name of the movie. Suicide Squad was about Suicide Squad. Man of Steel was about Man of Steel. Batman v Superman is about Batman v Superman. It's not about Wonder Woman. Yeah, it's the dawn of the Justice League, but it ain't about Wonder Woman. It ain't her movie. You know, it's weird how people can. I don't know what's wrong with people, man. Sometimes I wonder if you're about. Oh, I wish we had Roger Egbert out here. I wish we had him. He would make this so simple. He would break down the story of the movie, and then after that, he would just give you his assessment. Very, 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 very smart man. But he would take maybe about 4 paragraphs to summarize this movie. Let's go to the next guy, Rolling Stones. This is a long video, so bear with me. How Wonder Woman tackles the superhero movie's greatest foe, sexism. Alright, let's see what he got. This is done by a man, so he's satisfied. The woman, she's still longing. I don't know why you raise up Marvel, though. I don't know why Marvel had to come up in that conversation, which tells me that your mind was trying to talk down this movie so you could get Marvel up. Wonder Woman is the first female-driven superhero movie to hit multiplexes since 2004 disastrous Catwoman. And in between these two comic book cinema poles, there have been a glut of films which mask or caped dudes fighting injustice and taking on imposing foes. But what's remarkable about this blockbuster is that it may be the first comic book film in which the obstacles aren't solely demigods, diabolical villains, or a dark, tragic backstory, but rather a society predisposed to hold back women. And while the new movie, which stars Gal Gadot, is the mighty Amazon warrior princess, takes place near the end of World War I, the film couldn't be timelier or more in tune with the real-world gender imbalance. Other superheroes have it tough. Diana has to save the world and battle sexism. Let's count the ways. Okay, so this guy, he's one-dimensional, but it's okay. She gets mansplained constantly, okay? Patty Jenkins has devised Wonder Woman to partly resemble a fish-out-of-water comedy. Gal's Diana leaves her gorgeous hidden paradise of Themyscira to accompany U.S. secret agent Steve Trevor to London to help end World War I. Discovering along the way that humans' lives are very different to those of the gods, a lot of the humor involves otherworldly heroine not understanding Earth customs. For instance, people prefer you to wear petticoats in public instead of a bustier and not carry around a big sword. It also gives Steve numerous opportunities to lecture. Until she shows off her ability to be a ferocious warrior, Diana is at the mercy of endless mansplaining. Why it's dangerous to fight the German army on her own. Why she shouldn't be speaking during a meeting with male British officers. Why she's wrong in her belief that the god of war Ares is behind the German aggression, in the form of Danny Houston's fuming General Ludendorff. Now, it's not German aggression, by the way. The Germans are trying to get amnesty right now, and it's not about the Germans only, it's about both of them. As a result, Wonder Woman may be the only superhero movie where the titular hero is told again and again that the way she sees things is incorrect. By the way, if you do remember, Ares was on the side of the Allies. Again, I want to say, so people will understand, that Ares was playing both sides of the war. Yes, General Ludendorff, he gave him the idea for the potion, and Dr. Maru, Dr. Poison. You gotta excuse me, man. This has been a long video, so I'm gonna be yawning. All kinds of crazy things gonna happen. But in addition, you see that he also is playing the other side, the Allies side. Okay, and while this movie looks like the Allies are good people, no, they're not, because we realize that the Allies, they're willing to sacrifice a whole ton of people's lives just so that they can get this amnesty going, and that's because Ares wants that to happen, right? Ares is playing both sides. He's actually the villain, Ares, who's supposedly the villain, at least. He's playing both sides. So I hope you guys realize that. As a result, Wonder Woman may be the only superhero where the titular hero is told again and again that the way she sees things is incorrect. In part, this is because Steve, the film's love interest, wants to protect her. The film's best running joke, naturally, is that she is the last person who needs help. She can take care of herself just fine, thank you. Especially when it comes to, say, being able to throw tanks around like they're toy Tonka trucks and dispatch any number of bad guys with her fighting skills. But more importantly, she constantly proves that she's smarter than all the concerned trolls around her. In fact, it's one of the film's main themes. Just because men think they know best how the world works, whether it be warfare or social niceties, that doesn't necessarily make it so. She's judged upon her looks, and they talk about that. And yet, she never uses her looks to gain an advantage, right? She's compassionate, which is somehow treated as weakness. As they say, it's a reductive truism that women are more empathetic while men are allegedly more pragmatic. That's not really true, it's just they show things a little bit different. But anyway, Wonder Woman plays with the cliche, making the argument that Diana's small shows of compassion are part and parcel of her overall philosophy, which you can see on Themyscira they do have, especially when you look at Antiope and how she leads them, that we ought to care about each other, preferring peace to war, which obviously both Steve and Diana share. Yes, that's a simplistic sentiment, and right, this is still a comic book movie with plenty of heavy-duty action, but Diana's violence is directed at those who try to propagate hatred. Plus, she doesn't use guns and finds it monstrous, and there is such a thing as snipers who kill from afar to remove from their victims. The only person she really wants to kill is Ludendorff, whom she believes is the manifestation of Ares. Otherwise, She mostly deflects bullets and so on. She doesn't really kill when she's fighting. That's what they're saying. And she's not really angry when she's fighting. She keeps her pain to herself. They're talking about comparison with Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, how they mope and stuff. But Diana comes from a different situation. Basically, she comes from Themyscira. She's never really had any battle scars or sores. Steve has, however. And so it seems as though Wonder Woman seems far more emotionally healthy than her male cohorts. And it's not hard to think that the movie is again slyly commenting on gender cliches. When men have problems, it's treated with severe, furrowed brow solemnity. When women are upset, they're dismissed as being emotional. Diana has barely spent any time around mortal men, so it's interesting to see how she'll react to all the gloomy gusses she'll team up with the upcoming Justice League movie. And she's saying that she may keep them with levity. I don't know why they say levity. You know, these guys, they're obsessed with laughs and stuff like that. That's not what Wonder Woman... I don't remember Wonder Woman really... Did she ever laugh in that film? I don't think she laughed at all. It was a heavy film, by the way. I just think that in her case, she had to make a choice at the end of the movie if she wanted to still help mankind or if she wanted to pretty much annihilate mankind. That was the choice she had to make, because she realized that a lot about mankind was that mankind was actually that way. It wasn't like Ares making them to do something. So instead, she chose not to kill a villain of the movie, what we would call a villain of the movie. She chose not to kill her. And she only wanted to kill Ludendorff because of Ares. Her whole focus in this movie, that's what I'm trying to get, that the other lady misses, is she was going after Ares. She was not going after... And then when she finally meets Ares, and when she finally is confronted with Ares, she almost joins Ares, okay? She's thinking about it, and she just ran through some soldiers. And then when she realizes that she's about to, like, annihilate Dr. Poison, she takes up the time to kill him. And then she realizes, no, Steve was trying to show her that to do something doesn't mean destroying mankind. That's what Ares chose to do after he saw what mankind could do. And that's what Ares was explaining to her. He was telling her the truth. I saw what mankind was about. I saw what they were. And that's why I decided to destroy them. And the gods kind of tried to intervene, and so I had to destroy the gods to make sure that this happened. Because this creation that Zeus made, it started to turn dirty on its own self. I didn't do that. Ares attacks Diana. Do you realize that this movie, the final act, the final fight scene, Diana was not trying to destroy Ares anymore. Ares decided to come at Diana and destroy her. And so he shot that thunderbolt, that Zeus thunderbolt. Apparently he caught it and he kept it. He shot the Zeus thunderbolt at Diana. And a Zeus thunderbolt will kill a god, okay? And Diana rose up above the ground. She trapped the thunderbolt. And then she very sadly said, "Goodbye, my brother." Which was kind of sad. It was kind of sad in a way, because she didn't really want to kill him. And you can see she held her hand from even killing Ares. She was like thinking, nope, I'm just not going to do it. And then she shut back, and she let the thunderbolt come back at him. And it destroyed him, okay? And quite frankly, I think, quite frankly, we all know Wonder Woman's not somebody who just is a tyrant. When you look at Injustice 1 and Injustice 2 video game, you see if Superman and Wonder Woman were tyrants, that's what the world would look like. Obviously, in Batman v Superman, Superman wasn't a tyrant. You know, this was something that people used to say back in the day, by the way, that he was a tyrant. And that's why Wonder Woman came on the scene. Batman was considered this murdering vigilante, and Superman was a tyrant. And guess what? You guys' view of them are the same after Batman v Superman. And Zack Snyder, he's brilliant, I tell you. Zack Snyder brings Wonder Woman into the equation, just like in the sequence of how Superman and Batman actually came into comics. So Superman was the first to come into comics, and later on Batman, and then later on people was like tired of Superman and Batman, and they were like, look, Superman's like a tyrant. He keeps on beating up people and doing some mean things, and Batman, he's like this vigilante. He's like a killer. He's like a murderer. And what were people saying about Zack Snyder's universe? It's the murderverse. Snyder's got the murderverse. Superman's killing people, and Batman's just murdering people left, right, and center. Up comes Wonder Woman. And what's happening? She shows love, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, this is the comic, yes! She shows love Somebody should teach Superman and Batman how to behave. So we got the Trinity now. Don't we? Zack Snyder's a genius. This is Zack Snyder again, y'all. Zack Snyder understood how these comics fell into order. Like I said, if you look at Batman v Superman, Wonder Woman, and Justice League, you will understand that Wonder Woman is the linking key to all three movies. She is the link. And Zack Snyder wants women to be a focal point. Well, guys, I got to finish right here. On that note, you guys have a great one. Have a good one.